Almost immediately after the Luxor Hotel in Las Vegas opened, rumours of bad energy, misfortune, or even a curse began to spread, because the Luxor has been the site of various tragedies since it opened its doors in 1993. Factual details about these unfortunate events can be hard to come by, as they're hidden from public view, bad for business and all of that, but it seems that conspiracy theorists have filled those gaps in the stories, usually with a few sensationalist details added in, further fueling the rumours of a curse. But what makes some people believe that there is more to this story is that guests who check in for a stay at this uniquely shaped hotel on the Las Vegas Strip, who have no prior knowledge of the deaths, the crimes, the ghost stories that shroud this place, they will sometimes report an overwhelmingly negative feeling as soon as they set foot in the building. They'll be uneasy, on edge, just cannot relax the entire time they're at the hotel. Some skeptical people claim that it's just the way that the Luxor was built. The atrium inside can give you vertigo, and that can give you some really strange feelings. And that's why it's probably best not to look too closely down at the atrium from your room's balcony if you're one of those affected people. But others aren't so sure that that is actually what's going on here. Could it be the palpable energy of casino goers hoping to win it big but walking away with nothing? Could it be one of the many ghosts said to haunt the Luxor, from guests who passed away here, or even from before the building was on this site? Or could it really be a curse on this Las Vegas hotel? The Luxor Hotel, which has come to be probably one of the most recognisable buildings in Las Vegas, sits on the southern end of the Strip and was designed to be a family-friendly resort. During the late 80s, early 90s time, Las Vegas was really making a push towards appealing to families, and so resorts with almost Disneyland-level theming were popping up. You've got Excalibur, a medieval King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table themed hotel. That opened in 1990. There was Treasure Island, a pirate-themed one. The MGM Grand even included a theme park to appeal to these families. But in 1991, Circus Enterprises, now known as the Mandalay Resort Group, they announced that there was a new casino hotel coming. It was teased with the ambiguous temporary nickname of Project X, and they broke ground on a patch of land next to the Excalibur Hotel in April 1992. And just 18 months later, at a cost of $375 million, the Egyptian-themed Luxor Hotel was ready to open its doors on the 15th of October 1993. And the name Luxor comes from a city in Egypt containing the ruins of the ancient Egyptian city of Thebes. But even without knowing that connection to Egypt, the Egyptian theme is quite obvious as soon as you see the hotel. It is a huge, great big pyramid. It's actually one of the biggest pyramids in the world, and outside is a recreation of the Great Sphinx of Giza. And they actually had to make this recreated Sphinx larger than the original. As if they had made it to scale, it would have looked too small next to the Pyramid Hotel, just to give you an idea of scale. One of the most iconic parts of the Luxor Hotel has got to be the skybeam. It's actually the world's most powerful light, and it shines directly up into the night sky. It's been lit every night since the hotel's opening in 1993. However, since 2008, it's only been operating at half power. When MGM Resorts took it over, they wanted to save a bit of money and energy. But when the Luxor first opened, there were around 2,500 rooms with an absolutely huge casino that could fit something like 2,000 slot machines and a whole bunch of table games in there too. And when you walk inside the hotel into the atrium, it's a bit unique in that all the way up the sides of the walls are the different floors with the guest rooms on. And each floor has a balcony that looks out into the atrium, like that's how you walk along to get to your guest room. And these balcony walls really don't look that high. Say you're on the 20th floor or something, you can easily lean over the balcony to look at the ground floor below. That's gonna mess with your head. A lot of people say that they feel that vertigo feeling. A lot of them hug the walls because it just makes them super uncomfy, which is totally understandable. But back in 1993, the Egyptian theming was continued all the way through the interior as well. They had worked with Egyptologists to get really accurate replicas of artifacts that were used to decorate the hotel. There was also a riverboat ride around the pyramid, the Nile River Tour, where a tour guide would tell you all about these different artifacts as you were going around. And there was also a motion simulator ride, again all Egyptian themed, and they had really leaned into this. It was something else. However, rather unfortunately, this all wouldn't really last too long. The Nile riverboat ride was closed in 1996, just 3 years after opening, as part of a huge multi-million-dollar renovation where 2 towers of the guest rooms were added to the complex. They also started to scale back a lot of the Egyptian decor, which would continue in subsequent renovations and things. They removed the outdoor water fountain and instead put in valet parking and a monorail station, so yay convenience. The motion simulator ride was also closed in 2004, and so nowadays, other than the rather obvious pyramid-shaped building and the giant sphinx, once you get into the hotel, check into your room and whatnot, it's a lot more generic looking than when it first opened. There is an exhibition of King Tutankhamun's tomb where they've got a full-scale reproduction of his tomb, and you walk through kind of like the discovery of it and what they found and all of that. So I guess there is that still stays true to the theme. That's very on brand. But a lot of people are of the opinion that the Luxor's heyday has very much passed. The Tower Hotel rooms have been recently renovated, but the consensus is that the guest rooms are quite tired and in need of some TLC. But despite that, it continues to be a popular hotel for people to stay at. As well as King Tut's tomb, they've got other popular attractions going on alongside the casino. There's the Blue Man Group who perform there. They've also got the Bodies, the exhibition, which is where actual human bodies have been preserved by plastination, replacing all of your fluids with silicons, epoxy resins and things like that. But the one that would be absolutely endlessly fascinating to me is the Titanic exhibition, of course. I can't help but see the irony of having a Titanic exhibition in Las Vegas, in the middle of the desert. But the exhibition has hundreds of artifacts recovered from the sunken ship, personal belongings of passengers, and even a huge part of the ship's hull, lovingly known as the Big Piece. So obviously, these attractions are huge draws for visitors. I want to go. I'd love to see the Titanic exhibition. So I mean, surely, the Luxor can't be that cursed, really. It's still standing. I don't know financials, but it must be making money. It's not demolished, which in Las Vegas, that's a pretty big win. So where are all of these curse rumours coming from? How did they start? How did the Luxor Hotel become known as not only a super haunted building, but also potentially cursed as well? Well, it may have started all the way back in 1992, before the hotel was even finished, as there are records of construction workers being killed on the site. On the 4th of September 1992, they were pouring concrete, and there were a bunch of guys standing on a beam formwork, which is basically the mould which would help shape the concrete that they were pouring. This formwork was about 25 feet off the ground when the beam that they were standing on collapsed, and they all fell that 25 feet onto the ground below. 5 men were injured and taken to hospital, while a 6th, 40-year-old John Nobles was unfortunately killed in the accident. And then just 3 months after that, on the 14th of December, they were again pouring concrete, and 42-year-old Stephen Yandel was standing on the 4th floor and was directing the concrete being poured by a hose connected to a boom on a crane. All of a sudden, the boom hit Stephen and crushed his chest. And this one is extra heartbreaking. I mean, any death is really sad, but Stephen's was... He had 6 kids, and one of them, his son, was also working on the construction of the Luxor. As soon as the incident happened, a bunch of workers obviously rushed over to Stephen to see if they could help him, anything like that, and his son was one of those workers who went over, but there was nothing that they could do for him. So close to Christmas as well, the 14th of December, it's just so sad. But here is where we start to get a little murky, as there was a lot of talk of more than just 2 workers being killed during construction. Some say as many as 7. I only found evidence for 2 fatalities, no word of the other 5. I did see some anecdotal stuff of people saying that their relative or someone had worked on the Luxor, and they'd known that more men were killed. One said that someone died when a wall was going up and it crushed them, but it's not confirmed anywhere from what I can see. Some were saying that of course it's not, like management want to keep the deaths under wraps, need to look after the reputation of the soon-to-be hotel, and that's why we've never heard of it. But I don't know, I feel like construction regulations and inspections and things would make it a lot harder to keep that sort of information away from public record. I could be wrong, but it just seems a bit sus. What I did find though was construction workers claiming that they hated working on the Luxor. They said it didn't have good energy, it was a troubled job, and they would never stay in it. Whether that's more to do with the quality of the construction, maybe they knew the guys who died or something like like that, we don't know. But then inevitably, just like hotels all around the world, not just Las Vegas, it wouldn't be long after the Luxor opened before the first suicide occurred. In September 1994, a guest who was staying at the hotel, Frederick Bassong, he jumped from the 24th floor at about 3 in the morning. And that's the thing about the Luxor Hotel, because these guest rooms open out onto these balconies, that's how you get around and walk from the lifts, or inclinators as they like to call them, to your rooms, and they all face inwards into the atrium. People choosing to end their lives that way will fall into the main ground floor of the hotel. Just a couple of years later, on the 25th of September 1996, a woman jumped from the 26th floor and landed where the entrance to the buffet used to be, but is now actually the food court. Apparently, while she was sitting on the balcony with her feet dangling over the edge, there had been people pleading with her not to do it. One man had even reached out to grab her, but she threatened him, and so he'd backed off. Initially, police weren't able to identify her, and that was that for a long time, so in came the stories. Some people claimed that she was a sex worker and had recently found out that she had a HIV diagnosis. Others said that she'd just found her husband cheating in one of the guest rooms. But then I found a comment on a blog post from 2007, with the commenter claiming to be that woman's friend. The comment said that the woman's name was Sasha Clement, and that she'd come forward because people had been spreading misinformation about her. There was no HIV diagnosis, no cheating husband, actually no real reason why she did it in that moment, but she had unfortunately gone through a troubled past, and that may have had something to do with it. Similarly to the theories though, that is just a comment on an ancient webpage. It's not a news article or a death certificate or anything like that, so up to you to decide. There was one really sad case in 2001 though, where 33-year-old Mike Brown, also known as Mixmaster Mike Brown, a huge figure in Denver's hip-hop scene, he fell from the 10th floor. Witnesses say that he took a running leap off the balcony, so it appears that he intentionally ended his life. But the story might actually be a little bit more complicated than that. His family were adamant that he wouldn't do something like that. He was in the middle of basically battling against Denver's police department over racism, and he'd only come to Las Vegas to attend a friend's wedding. However, he'd recently had surgery for a stomach ulcer, and he found himself in a reasonable degree of pain, and so he'd gone to the hospital. They'd given him some medication, and apparently after that, he started acting really weird, just totally off. And so they don't know whether it was actually a bad reaction to the medication, and that's the reason why he did what he did. In 2010, there was another story about a guest falling from the 10th floor, but don't actually know what happened. Police say that there was no indication that he jumped, but that is as much as we know. But suicides, unfortunately, continue to happen at the Luxor. There was an article as recently as November 2024 where there were reports that a man had fallen to his death. And I'm sure there are even more that don't even get reported in the media at all. And just looking at the photos of these balconies though, like when I say that the walls don't look super high, they look scarily low. I think I would be one of those people hugging the walls on the opposite side just to stay away from the edge. But aside from people choosing to end their lives, the Luxor has seen so many more tragedies over the years. One particularly harrowing story is that of Sarah Gruber, a 16-year-old girl who had run away from home. And so apparently she'd had to turn to prostitution to make money. However, the news reports mention a new boyfriend, a not nice character, someone the family didn't really trust, so it really sounds like maybe she was actually being exploited. This story, it starts off sad and it doesn't get any better, I'm afraid. On the 14th of October 1996, she went back to one of the Luxor's guest rooms with a 30-year-old man, Michael Hathaway. A disagreement broke out between them, and so he'd strangled her to death, before he then stole some of the money back that he had just given her so that he could catch a bus to San Francisco, leaving Sarah on the floor to be discovered the next morning by cleaning staff. Hathaway was caught and he pleaded guilty to murdering her, but when asked why he did it, he didn't have an answer. He didn't know why he had just cut this young girl's life short and then just left her. There has also been quite a high-profile death that happened at the Luxor too. In 2010, there was a former college football player staying at the hotel. His name was Demario Reynolds, and he used to be a linebacker for the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. He was with his mates and his fiancée, having a good time, when he noticed that his friend, an MMA fighter called Jason Simon Sindelar, car, was arguing with his girlfriend. They'd all had a lot to drink by this point, and Jason was clearly absolutely enraged about something when he grabbed his girlfriend by the throat and started slapping her. DeMario quickly jumped in to intervene, bear hugging Jason from behind to try and get him to let go, all the while saying, "I don't want to fight you," all of this. He let go of Jason and that was that, but after letting go and walking off into the master bedroom, Jason followed him, where he proceeded to hit DeMario again and again in the head and chest area. I don't know if DeMario threw any punches at all. Justin's face did look quite bruised up in the mugshot, but quite quickly, DeMario was not fighting back at all. He had his arms up, he was trying to protect his head. It was a one-sided attack at that point. The hotel security was called and DeMario was taken to hospital, but he unfortunately passed away. What is super interesting though, is that the coroner ruled DeMario's death as an overdose of combined cocaine, ecstasy, and alcohol intoxication, but did mention that other significant conditions included a collapse following a physical altercation, and that it's possible the fight may have caused the heart arrhythmia in 26-year-old DeMario Reynolds. Justin had been arrested after DeMario's death and was facing a murder charge, obviously, but that coroner's report was enough to get the charges against Justin Sindelar dropped, which is just wild. There has been another murder case at the Luxor, this one a lot more recent, as on the 29th of June 2023, 17-year-old Emma Cusack shot 36-year-old Charlie Satrustagi. The pair had met on Bumble, the dating app, and they'd been talking back and forth for a couple of months before sharing this hotel room. They'd been drinking that night, obviously, and had apparently fallen asleep, but at some point in the night, Charlie had turned around and tried to kick Emma out of the room for coughing too loudly. But Emma, don't forget, this is a 17-year-old girl. She didn't have anywhere else to go. She didn't want to leave and she panicked. She took Charlie's gun, which had been sitting on a side table, and she attempted to rob him at gunpoint, basically, trying to scrape together some money so that she could move on. But Charlie allegedly lunged for the gun, and so she shot him twice. Once he was down, she stole his wallet, car keys, and multiple phones and left the hotel in Charlie's car. She didn't get too far before abandoning the car and turning herself in, saying that she never meant to shoot him. The thoughts going through Emma's head in that moment though, if it played out like she said that it did, the situation, I can only imagine, turned and got out of hand so fast. And it's only when the ringing in your ears stops and your adrenaline clears a bit that you can start to think logically about how this is going to go down. She was so young. Charlie was over double her age anyway, had multiple phones and a gun on the side table. The whole situation just sounds a bit off and just so sad. There's no getting away from the fact that Emma did kill someone, but I don't know, to me the situation just reads a little bit more like desperate young girl rather than cold-blooded murderer. Emma pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and she was sentenced to between 11 and 27 years in prison. But it's not just within the hotel where horrific murders have happened. The car parks around the Luxor have seen some things. In 1993, a 53-year-old cab driver called James Cox was stabbed to death by a man who was attacking his wife. Luckily, the wife escaped and security showed up to apprehend the guy, a man called William Witter. But can you just imagine that? The wife, Catherine Cox, she was an employee at the Luxor who had just finished her shift, but her car wouldn't start, so she had called her husband to come and help her out. In between that call and James arriving, William had appeared with a knife and threatened that he was going to kill her, a lot of other awful things. And then when James pulled up to help Catherine, he'd been murdered for it. William Witter was sentenced to death for the stabbing, and he's still sitting on death row now as of January 2025. And then a few years later, in 1996, a dishwasher who worked at the Luxor was killed in a drive-by by his girlfriend's estranged husband. And then there's the bombing. In 2007, an employee from Nathan's hot dog stand in the Luxor's food court, 24-year-old Willibaldo Durantes Antonio, he was walking back to his car on the top floor of the car park with his girlfriend. As he got closer to his car, there was something a bit weird on it. Someone had just left a coffee cup on the roof of the car turned upside down. Okay, a bit rude of the person, could have found a bin or whatnot, but whatever, it's a coffee cup. As Willibaldo picked up the cup to get it off his car and put it in the bin, he triggered the homemade pipe bomb that had been placed inside of it. The shrapnel from that bomb ripped a hole in his car's roof and unfortunately killed Willibaldo. His girlfriend was utterly miraculously unharmed in the explosion. Eventually, police found out that it was Willibaldo's girlfriend's ex-boyfriend, Omar Rueda Denvers, who had orchestrated the entire thing. He had roped in his mate, Porfirio Duarte Herrera, to build the bomb, and together they'd targeted Willibaldo's car. Both were sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole, which is where they are now. Although Porfirio Rio did try and take matters into his own hands. He escaped and was a fugitive for a few days before being recaptured. But all throughout the bombing incident in 2007, the Luxor was never evacuated, never closed or anything. I can imagine there were people probably playing the slot machines absolutely none the wiser that anything was going on outside. And when talking about deaths that have occurred at the Luxor, there is another story that is often talked about. In 2012 just seems to be a really bad year for the hotel. Lots seem to have happened then. But anyway, there was an airman who was visiting from the nearby Nellis Air Force Base, and he'd got into a bit of an argument with one of his colleagues, and they were in the lobby of the West Tower when the fight turned physical. And the airman got pushed against the doors to the lift, the elevator, the inclinator, whatever you want to call it. For some reason, these lift doors had actually opened at that point, even though there was no lift there. And this airman fell 25 feet down the shaft, after which he was rescued and taken to hospital with critical injuries. A lot of the sources I found that were talking about this story said that the airman had died, but from what I can see, there's nothing more said about him in news reports at the time. So as far as I can tell, it's not confirmed that he actually died, unless you know for sure and you can tell me in the comments. And then in December 2011, a 50-year-old guest staying at the Luxor lost her life when she was infected with Legionella bacteria, leading to her developing Legionnaire's disease. The thing was, 2 guests had contracted Legionnaire's earlier that year, with an employee falling ill with the disease in December 2010, thought to have been infected at the hotel too. So seems like they had a bit of an outbreak around that time, but those 3 did recover. It was only the one guest that lost her life. And after all that I've just told you about, all of the tragedy, the misfortune, that doesn't even include any of the guests who pass away from natural causes within the hotel. Whether they're victims of the curse too, who's to say? And so due to the size of the hotel, the amount of people who come and go each day, and the unlucky ones who unfortunately never leave alive, some people believe that this is the reason that the Luxor Hotel is allegedly super haunted. And a lot of the paranormal activity, it seems to centre around the pyramid part of the hotel rather than the new towers. Apparently, there's some paranormal activity in room 30018, which I believe would be a room on the 30th floor. But anyway, the story goes that at 8:30 a.m. every morning, there's a metal clanging noise coming from the bathroom, as if a ghostly entity is trying to get the occupants of the room up and out of its space. What I found really interesting about that particular story though, is that I could only trace it back to a TripAdvisor review from 2021, where they mentioned the room that they were staying in, 30018, and they said that every morning at 8:30 a.m. they would hear the soap bar clinking around the soap dish in the bathroom. Without fail, like clockwork, 8:30 a.m. every morning for the entire 5 days they were staying there, and so they were convinced that it was a residual haunting, and they actually said that in their review. I didn't find anyone else who had stayed in that room coming forward to say that they also heard this noise, and I can't help but wonder, 8:30 a.m, noise in the bathroom. Is it that people are waking up, having a morning clear out, taking a shower, and maybe there's a pipe right behind where the soap dish is? You see where I'm coming from here? But if you've stayed in this infamous room and you've heard the noise at 8:30 in the morning, please do let me know. But anyway, aside from that one, there are more alleged ghost stories surrounding the Luxor, especially if you happen to check into a room on the 12th floor of the pyramid. Apparently, multiple guests over the years who've been staying on that floor have woken up in a blind panic to the feeling of hands squeezing tightly around their necks. Other people wake up to see the figure of a blonde woman standing right next to their bed, watching them while they sleep. What's really interesting about this one is that, again, allegedly, a lot of these guests, before they wake up, are having a really strange dream, and in this dream is the blonde woman. And all of these guests that have claimed this, they apparently don't have any connection to each other, they don't know each other, they don't know what other guests have reported, so if true, that is weird. But it appears to happen so frequently that one TripAdvisor review mentioned that they'd had this weird experience, and when they called down to reception asking for a different room, the person who answered the phone didn't seem in the least bit surprised that a guest on the 12th floor wanted a different room, or they were just completely apathetic, one of the two. There is also apparently another entity on the 26th floor, as guests staying on this level have heard sounds like someone is going through their suitcases, seeing what they've got in their luggage. Perhaps more unnervingly though, is that some people claim to feel the sensation of someone pushing them while they're walking along the balcony to their room. But there is also one entity from seemingly a time before the hotel was even here, a man in a brown suit. If you're walking along the upper floors of the pyramid, you might come across this stern, no-nonsense looking man who's wearing an old-fashioned brown pinstripe suit. And he's walking like a man on a mission, and if you don't move out of his way, he'll just walk straight through you, leaving you feeling like you've just been hit by a block of ice. It's just super cold. He's also apparently apparently accompanied by the smell of BO, cigarettes and alcohol, which is a lovely combination. Some think that the way that he's dressed, and with him looking so unbelievably angry and like he's got somewhere to be, he might be a Las Vegas mobster or one of their victims. But other than theories, we don't really know who he is or why he is haunting a building that was constructed in the 1990s, way after the time of the mafia basically running the city. Not saying there isn't a mob presence there now, but it's absolutely not on the scale that it once was. But aside from a potential mobster, people have also claimed to witness the apparitions of the construction workers who were killed while building the hotel. These sightings were, allegedly, seen pretty soon after the Luxor opened. Guests would claim that in quiet corners or the dark tunnels of the old Nile River tour, that's where you'd be likely to see them, just watching silently. And this story goes so far as to say that that was half the reason the riverboat tour ride thing was ripped out. It was because of people seeing the ghosts of the construction workers, which, I don't know, seems like a little bit of a stretch to me. Maybe because these fatalities hadn't been that long ago. They died in 1992, the ride opened along with a hotel in 93, so deaths were still on people's minds maybe. But there's also one of the more recent additions to the hotel, which claims to come with its own ghosts too. The Titanic exhibition at the Luxor contains a display of over 350 artifacts that have come from the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. Everything from personal toiletries, eyeglasses, things like that, all the way through to the White Star Line china and even a bottle of unopened champagne. But some people believe that these artifacts have brought with them something paranormal. Joe Zimmer, who was working as the exhibition's artifact specialist when he was interviewed in 2012, he said that he's had plenty of weird experiences. Way after closing at 11 o'clock at night, all the guests have obviously left, Joe claimed that he would hear someone calling out his name, but that he's also heard giggling and he's apparently felt his hair and clothes being pulled at. Other staff members working on the exhibition have claimed to hear classical music playing, but there are no speakers switched on playing music or anything like that. Shadowy figures have been seen moving really rapidly in between the display cases, which, just reading about, no, don't like that. As well as the artifacts, the exhibition also includes recreations of what particular areas on the Titanic would have looked like, and these seem to be very interesting areas of the attraction, as people have had strange experiences in these parts. So the first recreated scene I need to tell you about, quite possibly the most iconic staircase in the world, the Grand Staircase. Apparently both staff and guests have witnessed a woman standing on these stairs. She appears wearing a black dress with a white collar and has her hair tied into a bun. She's just seen standing there, but when you call out to her, she vanishes. So you definitely know she isn't a guest or a costumed staff member or anything like that. And if you don't see her, you might hear the sound of a woman's heels as someone unseen walks up the steps. Footsteps have also been heard in the area where people can see the differences in passenger accommodations. A lot of people have also mentioned a really uneasy feeling in this particular area, like someone's watching them. The exhibition also has a recreation of the promenade deck, where you would have been able to take a stroll along the promenade and look out at the vast expanse of ocean. But in this particular promenade in the exhibition, the apparition of Frederick Fleet has been seen. And if you don't know, Frederick was one of the 6 lookouts on board the Titanic, and he was on watch that night along with another lookout called Reginald Lee. But it was Frederick who first saw the iceberg that the Titanic was doomed to hit. Obviously, we all know the story. By the time he'd seen it, it was too late. Other than, as people have theorised, if she'd been allowed to hit the iceberg head on, may possibly, potentially have been enough to save her. But that isn't what happened, and while Frederick survived the sinking, he went on to live his life, served in both World Wars. He would unfortunately end his life in 1965, after his wife died and her brother kicked him out of the house that they were living in. And so now people have seen Frederick's apparition staring out at the ocean from this replica promenade in the Titanic exhibition in the Luxor Hotel, potentially searching for the iceberg he missed until it was too late. Elsewhere in the exhibition too, I mean, there's just a lot going on in the Titanic exhibition, right? But there's a portrait of Bruce Ismay, the head honcho, the chairman and the managing director of the White Star Line, the shipping company which owned and operated the Titanic. Bruce had been a passenger on the Titanic, but he'd actually boarded a lifeboat when she was sinking, something that he was ripped apart for in the media, being super heavily criticised for it, as there were still women and children on, and yet he'd gone ahead and saved himself. So there were very strong feelings around Mr. Ismay. One night, once the exhibition had all been locked up for the night, there was no one around. This portrait ended up on the floor. When staff came in the morning, saw his portrait on the floor, you just immediately assume, oh well, it fell off, yada yada, nothing untoward going on here, right? It was strange, however, how this portrait it had fallen to the floor and the glass in the frame hadn't broken, and how it hadn't triggered the motion sensors. So they checked the CCTV, and apparently they watched the portrait slide slowly down the wall. It turned a little onto its side and then carried on sliding down to the floor. If anyone working in the exhibition has seen the footage or even has the footage, please get in touch with me. It is a great story, but it is just a story until we can actually see what is being claimed here. The portrait has also been witnessed shaking on the wall, as if someone unseen is just going hell for leather, shaking the frame, or it's in its very own exclusive earthquake that no one else is invited to. But it's led some people to believe that there are spirits of the passengers or even crew members who are hanging around the exhibition, maybe because of all of the artifacts, and they're still angry at Bruce for what he did, or didn't do, as it was still an honourable thing to do at the time to go down with your ship, like Captain Edward Smith had. But just with the Luxor Hotel, a lot of the time, it's not specific paranormal stories. There seems to be a lot of general otherness going on here. We've already touched on the weird feelings and vibes people get when they're in the hotel. A lot of people say that it just feels creepy and haunted. Others just put that down to the hotel being a bit run down and tired. I mean, strange smells, flickering lights, plumbing with a mind of its own. That could all just be the fact that the hotel needs some more money spending on it. Some guests claim to wake up in the middle of the night with intense chest pains, heart palpitations, soaking wet night sweats, all of this, with no prior history or illnesses or anything like that. Others will be woken up to the sounds of someone hammering on your door, only there's no one out there, and even the security cameras show that no one's walked past. And I saw quite a few reports of people seeing shadow figures just in the corner of their eyes, just in that peripheral vision that came with an intense creepy feeling. And so with all of this alleged activity occurring at the Luxor Hotel, with the unfortunate deaths, all of this, does this make you think that the hotel is actually cursed? For some people, yes, it does. A lot of people couldn't help but point out the inaccuracies of some of the Egyptian decor at the Luxor Hotel, leaving some to believe that this has perhaps offended the ancient Egyptian gods. Starting before you even enter the hotel, sphinxes most likely came in pairs, and if you're building a pyramid, you need a sphinx facing both east and west to protect your pyramid from evil spirits coming from either side. But as the Luxor only has one on the east side, the west side has now been open to attack from evil. Some say that the very building itself, by its very nature, is a curse. The pyramids were mostly used as tombs, final resting places for the dead. Not a place where you're gonna kick back on your holidays and win it big on the slot machines, you know? It's almost like creating a hotel modelled on a Victorian graveyard, where you can sleep in your own little mausoleum where the Nile River ride is a curse. Wait, this actually sounds amazing. Can we do that, Vegas? Can we make that theme happen? Little goth holiday in the desert? That sounds amazing. But also, on the Egyptian angle of a curse, a lot of people believe that disturbing King Tutankhamun's tomb unleashed a curse on the people who discovered it in 1922. And now the Luxor has a whole exhibition where you go through the recreation of the discovery. You see where my head is at with this? So perhaps with all of that going on, that does mean that the Luxor is cursed. Or there is no such thing as a curse on the Luxor, and it just means that people have a reason to connect all the tragedy to something, to connect it all together into something significant. Because there's surely been a lot of death over the years at the Luxor, right? A lot of tragedies, heartbreak, all of this in one hotel. Yes, there has. And there have been some really horrific, harrowing cases. But it's not actually an unusually large amount of death. Yes, there were 2 confirmed deaths while the hotel was being built. Not unusual. Construction is dangerous. They'd already been a bit iffy about the project because it was a pyramid. It was a challenging build from the off. It's not ideal to lose workers, but it's also not uncommon, even with builds that aren't as unique as this one. And with the suicides, they happen in hotels around the world, not just Vegas. But a Vegas hotel, they attract both tourists and residents, down on their luck, had bad news, lost everything. It happens a lot. It's not just the Luxor. And we're never going to get accurate numbers on how the Luxor stacks up against the rest of the hotels on the Strip because they're just not reported. Hotels won't like that kind of attention, obviously, but also the media don't usually publicise them, really, unless it's a really high-profile case. But when the connection between the cursed Luxor and death is brought up, the fact that Tupac was staying at the hotel when he was shot in 1996 is usually mentioned as well. But again, don't really think he was a victim of the curse. It's not like the Sphinx's nose fell off and crushed him. Okay, so with all of that said, curse or not, whichever side of the fence you sit on, where have all the hauntings come from? Some ghost stories appear to be connected to the unfortunate murders and suicides that happened here. That could help explain some of the goings on. Obviously, the Titanic exhibition, that appears to be a major factor. A lot of people actually claim that the activity increased around 2008 when the exhibition opened, and all of these personal artifacts from people who lost their lives in a horrendous way were put on display. One interesting theory was that the bodies exhibition might have something to do with it too. And this particular exhibition is not the one that I was thinking it was. It's not by the same guy who went through all the controversy in the early 2000s, Dr. Gunther von Hagens. He's connected to the exhibition called Body Worlds, whereas this one is Bodies, the exhibit. But von Hagens, he claimed that he had paper trails and consent for all the bodies on display, but there was still a bit of a question mark over that one. But this exhibition at the Luxor is a completely different company altogether, and they make no secret of the fact that their plastinated bodies are unclaimed cadavers from China. So they are not people who have explicitly given consent for their body to be plastinated and displayed in the way that they have been. Aside from the huge moral and ethical implications that this throws up, from a more paranormal perspective, could this have brought something to the Luxor Hotel? Although nothing unexplained has ever been reported in this area from what I can see. But another theory as to why the hotel is supposedly so haunted is from before it was even a hotel. And it's said that this area of the Strip was a popular dumping ground for mobsters to bury any evidence of a murder, so like the body. And I mean, it would track with why the man in the brown pinstripe suit is seen, maybe. But surely, as part of the construction work, they would have had to dig down and they would have come across these mob victims? I don't know. But at the end of the day, it is important to remember that the Luxor is a Las Vegas hotel, and it is a huge one at that. There are so many people moving through the hotel each day, coming to Vegas to experience the iconic city on a trip of a lifetime, to drink, to gamble, to party, to lose their life savings. That is an awful lot of energy and some really big emotions. Maybe that has something to do with it. But whatever you decide the explanation may be as to the strange atmosphere at the Luxor, the unexplained encounters the staff and guests claim to have, and why some people who enter the hotel just can't wait to leave, there's no denying that this Las Vegas building has seen its fair share of heart-wrenching tragedies. So if you're staying at the hotel while you're away in Sin City, keep an eye out for construction workers who look out of place, or people vanishing into thin air right in front of your face. And please, if you suffer from vertigo and you're on an upper floor, don't look down from the balconies. But as always, tell me your thoughts. There was a lot to untangle with this one. I knew the story was probably going to be on the larger side just because of everything I'd heard about the place. But once I got into the research, wow. But like I said, the Luxor is a big hotel. A lot of people in and out every day. And it employs a lot of people too. There are a lot of people connected to this building. There was even one of the fantasy show dancers, a woman called Deborah Flores Narvaez, who was murdered by her ex-boyfriend. She wasn't killed in the hotel, but just to give you an idea that the Luxor could be connected to so many people, and by extension of that, so many tragedies. But as for the curse of the Luxor Hotel, I think it's similar to what I said last week about the curse of Atuk. People like to make connections where there probably isn't one. And so I don't believe that there is a curse, but I do believe that it absolutely could be haunted. Whether I'm inclined to believe every witness's claims, I'm still pretty skeptical, with the one TripAdvisor review leading to an infamous haunted guest room, and really just across the board, a lot more legend has it rather than actual individuals coming forward and saying, this happened to me. Plus, let's not forget this is a hotel which serves alcohol, people partying all night, so that also may have something to do with it. I think the Luxor is also a victim of its own reputation. A lot of the stories seem to have just been taken and ran with, added onto, details changed slightly and whatnot. Looking at the reviews, I can absolutely see why a lot of people say it's got a creepy vibe, they don't feel right in there. There are some areas where it really does look like it's in desperate need of some money spending on it. And would it kill you to put up a few fiberglass scarabs or some more hieroglyphics or something up around the lobby? Your building is literally a pyramid. Lean back into the theme, even with just a few extra subtle details. But as always, let me know what you think of the Luxor. There was a lot to digest here. It's seen some really sad situations, lots of strange stories, so tell me your thoughts. And if you enjoyed this, please do give give the video a little like. I am obsessed with covering Las Vegas hotels. I absolutely love doing them. And if you love hearing about them, plus other stories from the history behind even more hauntings, then maybe you'd like to subscribe too if you haven't already. But that is all from me today. Go get yourself a drink of water. Rehydrate, please. You may have also seen my post on socials a few days ago about my own little dehydration mission with the lovely chaps at Paralytic Activities. They invited us out for a haunted pub crawl in Nottingham. Absolutely wasn't going to say no to that. They put out a video of our travels, and there's a little bit of history and a few other ghost stories delivered by yours truly from each pub we visited. So if that sounds like something that you'd fancy watching, I will throw the link in the pinned comment. They are utterly brilliant, guys. We had such a great laugh with them. But anyway, I cannot wait to chat with you more about the morbid, mysterious and macabre. So until next time, sleep safe. Was no one going to tell me that half of my hair is hanging out of my claw clip? I've just got to the end of the video and I didn't put my hair in a ponytail. Why does it look like that? Oh dear. My hair's had a little trim, and so now the way that I do my claw clip, I just get little spiky bits. We'll go with it. It's 90s, isn't it? Y2K? Is that what they're called? Y2K fashion. We'll say it's that.